Welcome to today's seminar, 5 Qualities for Cultivating Strong Communities with Dr. Joe Schaeffer. Joe brings a unique viewpoint to the field of community with his deliberate focus on the internal qualities of character that help to create and sustain vibrant, resilient communities. As a professor of cultural anthropology and communications at Marlborough College in Vermont, Joe became a respected authority on interpersonal communication, specializing in problem-solving and decision-making processes. He has traveled throughout Europe, Russia, Latin America, and North America to study community building, creativity and communication, and conflict transformation. He is the author of several books, including The Pebble Game, Achieving Creativity and Human Interaction, and most recently, Living Community, which offers 30 short think pieces to draw upon Joe's research and rich experience in strengthening authentic communication and managing conflict. Joe, thank you so much for joining us on the call today. It's wonderful to be talking with you and learning more about the 5 qualities of character your research found to help successfully build communities and the types of communication that we all need to employ to ensure that those qualities are nourished. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Good. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your kind words.
I would love to get us underway by asking if you could start by sharing with us a bit about how you identified the 5 qualities of character, and in particular the question that you posed to help guide your research.
Okay, first let me apologize to everybody. I have a bit of a cold, so I've been coughing a lot this morning. So if I cough, don't be concerned. I may turn away from the microphone and just cough for 5 minutes or so. No, I'm just kidding, but cough for a short period of time. 3 major influences that brought me to the work. The first I called the World Issues Project. Many, many years ago, I started writing questions. Whenever I read a great novel, I would write questions that I'd like to talk to the author about. Or if I noted the work of a great diplomat in the United Nations, for example, I would write questions that I would like to talk to him or her about. Or if I read something in the New Yorker, or read something in a science magazine, or saw a great painting, or listened to a wonderful piece of music, I would write questions for the person who created that. Those questions led to 4 primary results. Well, 2 to begin with, and they were that if you want to understand human living, people living together, you must understand relationships. I heard a talk by a leader one time, and he said leadership is all about relationships, 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 and relationships. And I think he was right. Actually, the whole, everything is about relationships in the natural world and in the cultural world. The areas that they emphasized were the levels of consciousness in human beings, language and meaning, responsibility and choice, and openness to learning. They brought me to a question. The question was, how can we be truly humane with each other because we have these capacities? The second influence was my own personal life in a small town in Pennsylvania. There were 2 sides of the community literally split in the middle by a railroad track. The 2 sides, people from the 2 sides were always arguing with each other and fighting with each other. So many of my friends in school were fighting with each other, not getting along, having conflicts with the teachers and with other pupils. One day when I was very young, I sat down with my mother and I said, why do people fight so much? And she smiled and said, well, someday you may figure that out. Well, I never have, but I've certainly been working on it my whole life. That question evolved into the question that I work on today, which is what would people be like within and with each other in the best of all possible worlds, in families, schools, places of work, neighborhoods. Not a utopia, not a perfect, ideal, impossible world, but a real, everyday world. The third influence, and this is the most important one, was the thousands and thousands of people that I have had the joy of doing workshops with, about 15 to 20,000 over the last 20 years. They have taught me even more. That question I ask of every one of them, and the responses they gave to what would people be like with each other tended to be similar. They said they would like people to be sincere, interesting, non-judgmental, accepting of differences, supporting of others, clear, unique, passionate, empathetic, compassionate, kind, supportive, caring, loving, thoughtful, and etc., and etc. Over the years, I started putting those characteristics into areas of meaning. So, for example, accepting of differences and non-judgmentalism and tolerance and supporting others, I put that under a characteristic which I called acknowledgement. I did the same with the others, and I ended up with 5 what I now call qualities of human character. They are genuine interest. When genuine interest is applied to the self, it involves self-understanding. When it's applied to others, it involves understanding others. Acknowledgement, when applied to the self, leads to self-esteem and self-awareness. When applied to others, leads to accepting of others. Empathy, very, very deep empathy, when applied to the self, implies openness and honesty about the self, and when applied to others, implies empathy and compassion. Altruism, a deep love for each other, implies growth and support of self and self-actualization, and when applied to others, it implies caring, patience, support, and love. And the 5th is trust. When applied to the self, of course, it implies self-trust, and when applied to others, it implies trust of others. Those are the 5 qualities of character. They have been influenced by those 3 fundamental background experiences.
Joe, that is just lovely. In spite of the rich journey and the powerful influences that drew you to this, I think what really resonates for me is how you have been able to be so clean and simple in explaining these, first discerning, but then explaining these 5 characters or qualities and being very clear about what does that look like within myself and or what does that look like in the context of someone else. So it makes something that seems very complex on one end seem very clear, tangible, and doable. It's lovely.
Well, they are doable. I've seen it with so many thousands of people, and they really are not complicated in any way. They're very simple and very direct. Sometimes people say to me after a workshop, well, I think I knew all that before I did the workshop. Mm-hmm. And I always say, well, that means the workshop was a success.
Oh, that's lovely.
You know, because these characteristics and qualities are within. We carry them with us everywhere.
Wow. Can I ask you then to maybe go back and touch a little bit more deeply on each of these 5 qualities, and in particular talk about what your sense is about how each contributes to creating and sustaining strong communities?
Okay, let's start with genuine interest. And here's a little bit of information which I found interesting when I came across it. Social science, the social science grapevine says that people speak 85 to 120,000 words to themselves every day. That's a lot of self-talk, and it can interfere with openness to others, with genuine interest in others. 80% of the words are about other people. 60 to 70% of the words about other people for many, many, many people are negative. So essentially, if the grapevine is to be believed, we spend much of each day finding fault with things and people around us rather than finding caring and support. If a person carries community within, and now I want to use that term, living community, rather than building community, which I think is fundamental as well, and expresses the qualities of character, she no longer makes bets about human beings. She never says, I bet I know who you are when she meets a new person. She transforms that question through the quality of genuine interest into the question, I wonder who you are. As I do that, I wonder what makes your life tick. I wonder what you believe in. I wonder what you love. I wonder what problems you have. I wonder what you find exciting. I wonder, I wonder, I wonder. Now, I don't go up to you and look you in the eye and say, what strikes awe into you? I carry the wonder within me. I don't say anything. I just have it within me. And you can see it in my eyes. So that's genuine interest. It also implies that you are interested in yourself. When I did the work with those people I admired, and when I do workshops, I ask what I hope are fundamental and interesting questions through which we can discover ourselves. I'll give you a few of them. Who are the most important people to you in the generation of your grandparents? Why are they important? What do you think we should be doing with our children such that they become good ancestors? What is something you do well that few people are aware of? What are your hopes and dreams for the future? How important is tradition to you? What do these words mean to you? Power, freedom, spirit, nature. So genuine interest is a fundamental quality that can take us very far in living community. If genuine interest is accompanied by a willingness to move from a domination, power orientation implied in the phrase, I judge, to a cornerstone of community and partnership captured in the phrase, I learn, we have a very powerful, powerful way of engaging with each other. When a person achieves this quality, I call this quality acknowledgement, this ability to acknowledge the self and others, she feels and expresses self-worth, resting on the appreciation of her individual ways of living and the life ways of her culture. At the same time, she learns of and appreciates another person's life and culture from that person's point of view to the degree that she is capable of doing so. The third quality of character, deep empathy, is fundamental in human society. In community, individuals know they have the strength to feel joy and sadness, to experience happiness and hurt. And they are willing to witness the joy and sadness of others without indulgence. They have moved from I pity you through deep empathy to I sense and feel as if from within your eyes. Deep empathy is not sympathy. It's not compassion, although those are fundamental in community. One person does not feel for another or with another. They feel as another. The Greek actor achieved deep empathy when he became as the character. The Greek actor did not act the character. The Greek actor became as the character he was playing. When a person senses deep empathy, she becomes as the other to the degree that this is possible. She experiences life with the second person side by side rather than face to face. In workshops, I actually have people practice sitting side by side. One person tells a story, a meaningful story in their lives, if they wish, and the other person simply witnesses the story. I once did a workshop for young people who were in leadership positions in their schools. One of the women, a girl actually, she was 14, an Aboriginal woman, was telling a story about how she had been, this is a tough story, so get ready, how she had been abused by her mother's husband when she was young. And she leaned over and she started to cry. I, being the, well-known facilitator, forgot that I wanted to practice deep empathy. And I leaned over and I said, "Joni, are you all right?" And she said, "I'm not finished yet." Later on, I did the same. She was still crying, and I leaned over and I said, "Joni, are you all right?" I forgot to practice deep empathy and believe that she could care for herself through her story. And she looked at me and she said, "I'm ready to come home." And 30 young people, not literally, but came over and gave her a hug because it was so powerful to experience that. Altruism is probably the most powerful of the qualities of character in moving from a power domination society to a community partnership society. I use a very simple idea to begin my work on altruism. It's from Mahatma Gandhi, that we need to go from I want to I need. I want a rich house, I need shelter. I want a BMW, I need transportation. I want a fur coat, I need warmth in winter. I want fame, I need an opportunity to develop, nurture, and express my gifts, talents, and abilities. Altruism implies that I care so deeply about other people that I'm willing to go to the extreme of human potential to support them in their needs. So, for example, with my child, my newborn child, or even a child who is older than newborn, I can say with everything I am, with everything I have, and with everything I do, I wish you your hopes and dreams. Am I willing to say that to a stranger? Am I willing to say that to the person I work with? Am I willing to say it to my mother and father and my sister and my brother? With everything I am, with everything I have, with everything I do, I wish you your hopes and dreams. And further, if for you to achieve your hopes and dreams, and they are within the confines of the law and moral living, I would gladly give my life. Now, I don't go around killing myself to help other people, but I do act on the power of altruism. For example, if I am up for a job and another person is up for the same job, and I think that person would do a better job than me, I go to the boss and say, "John, I think Charles would do a wonderful job as the new manager, so I'm going to step out of that position." Now, of course, I don't do that. Why? Because I'm afraid. If I do it, John is going to think that I'm a failure, that I don't have the courage to explore and to invent and to create. And I find in the work that that's the key barrier to living in community at the deepest possible level, the simple feeling of fear. A fifth quality of character, trust, is also fundamental. But it's a different kind of trust. In the world I come from, I ask, can I trust you? And when I ask that, I want to know whether you are going to violate my trust. So perhaps I will wait to see if you do. Or I refuse to trust you until I am convinced that you are worthy of my trust. In living community, excuse me, in living community, we use a different definition of trust. The definition comes from a question. As I stand before you, can I trust myself not to do anything knowingly hurtful to you? Now, I may make a mistake. God knows I'm not psychologically perfectly healthy. I don't understand lots of things in the world and in life. But if I do make a mistake and I do something hurtful to you, please tell me and we can try to work it out and come together. Now, it's interesting. If I ask the question, can I trust you, I never can answer that question totally and completely positively. Now, if I live with you for a long time and we love each other deeply and we understand each other deeply, obviously I'm pretty sure that I can trust you. But even in that situation, after 50 years of living together, you might come home to me one day, and I say this kiddingly, but you might come home one day and say, I met him, or I met her, and he's not you, or she's not you. It's at least a thousandth of a possibility always. Whereas if I say, can I trust myself? I know that I can trust myself to the degree that I am healthy and aware and understanding and caring and supportive. If you trust yourself and I trust myself at the same time, we can live creatively together instantaneously. So those are the qualities of character, Sylvia and the rest of you wonderful people. They keep me going. I try to practice them as best I can. I fail much of the time, but they're very meaningful in my life. They allow me to live with others in a truly creative and cooperative way. So I call them character qualities of character in living community.
Wow. Joe, I'm really struck by how essential each one of those qualities are, and I'm left with a sense in many ways that when you're inviting me and others to live community, it's almost as though you're saying how you choose to be, both to yourself and to others, is the work. That is what we're supposed to be doing. So the being is the doing, as much as, you know, going out and working on sort of shared projects together or smiling and saying hello to each other. It's sort of doing an internal piece of work around how I am and how I approach people. Is that right?
Yeah, I think of it as having two prongs. One is how I am within. That is who and how I am within. So if I'm genuinely interested in myself, I'm striving for self-understanding. And that's powerful in community as well. Then the other side, of course, is I'm striving to achieve understanding of you. So I'm doing both at the same time. Each one of the qualities of character has those two sides to it.
Okay. And you talked about fear being perhaps the biggest barrier to the building of community. And so can I assume that if I am committed to these 5 qualities and working both internally and on the 2 prongs, sort of how I interact with you and how I am internally, that helps to lessen the level of fear that gets in the way of us building community?
Yeah, it does, but I'm not naive. I don't want to be naive. I would never, if I was in a situation where I was being threatened, I would never say, I would never give in to that and say that I'm not allowed to feel fear. Mm-hmm. I would feel the fear, and I would use my dominator, my power abilities, and everything I could muster to get through the situation successfully. I even might. I'm not weak in my membership in the world, okay. But with many pockets of community, many pockets in the world, I can practice the qualities of character without fear. So fear remains, and it has to be an emotion that I'm aware of when it happens, and I have to know what to do. Sometimes I can get through it without doing anything. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I can talk to the person, if it's one person whom I'm fearful of. But yeah, so just to be sure that I'm not naive, even though I know that I can practice the qualities of character in many pockets of community all over the world.
That's really helpful, that you don't let go of fear when fear is legitimate, right? That's what right. I'm hearing you say. You don't go in naively, but you do your best to create these conditions wherever you are.
Yeah, I have good dominator skills, right? I've learned them since I was a kid. It's that I now wish to practice partnership skills, and that's what the qualities are for, to help me practice partnership skills with others.
Got it. So are these 5 qualities of character something that a person is just born with, and some people kind of get more than others, or are these kind of qualities things that we actually can cultivate and develop?
Okay, let's look at each one quickly. Genuine interest, the first quality of character. We all know how curious babies are. I would imagine that there are some fundamental genes that are connected to curiosity and exploration. At the same time, that's nurture. At the same time, nature, culture can have a very strong influence on children. Children can lose their curiosity. They can become uninterested in other people, uninterested in learning. That would be the negative part of nature. On the other hand, they can be encouraged and they can receive a sense of entitlement and move towards self-actualization. That would be a nature process, a cultural process, a nurture process. Nature is biology. Let's look at acknowledgement and altruism. They come probably from the same genetic sources. Lionel Tiger, an anthropologist, once argued that we protect and care for those who are closest to us genetically. I think he might be right, although, as we know through nurture, we can adopt a child now who is not close to us genetically and care just as deeply for that child as for a child who is born to us biologically. Now, empathy. Fascinating work is being done on empathy right now. It turns out that the areas of the brain that are stimulated when I feel certain strong emotions and you are present are the same areas that are stimulated in you. You literally, not figuratively, you literally feel with me. So we feel at the same time the same emotions together. Extremely interesting findings about empathy, although we haven't gone very far. I mean, the most that we can do with empathy is to track the areas of the brain that in which it occurs. Trust is required to achieve a sense of safety. I imagine that trust is also to some degree genetically predetermined. Well, I should talk about it this way. Ernst Mayr once talked about genetic pre-programming, that there was a pre-programming in the human genes that made it possible for us to achieve certain things when we were alive. The pre-programming is not rigid. It doesn't force us into a certain way of behaving, but it gives us an opportunity to explore those ways of behaving, and I think trust is probably one of those. The research in genetics today is profoundly interesting and opening up all kinds of new ways of thinking and seeing in the world. There's one that I'll mention that has nothing to do with the qualities of character, but I was reading in a psychology text recently that some scientists are discovering that genes are actually relevant to the development of conservatism or liberalism, that liberals and conservatives have literally different genetic predispositions. Just a fun finding. I would also like to mention Riane Eisler's work here. She's one of the people I interviewed in that project where I talked to the people I most admired in the world. And Riane was writing a book, The Chalice and the Blade, when I interviewed her. That was her first book. She argued, and I used this word before, that we have two types of societies, dominator societies and partnership societies. Obviously, if I'm raised in a dominator society, the nurture part of my upbringing has certain patterns and structures built into it. So, for example, I'm a hunter-gatherer, and I'm a male, and so my tendency is to learn domination because I'm out hunting animals in dangerous and rigid situations. I probably have those genes now for hunter-gatherer behavior. That is, I probably have genes for domination. But nurture is so powerful in my life in a partnership way that I can learn not to be a dominator. I don't have to try to dominate my children or dominate women or dominate or people. I don't have to try to do that. I've learned not to do that. In fact, I've learned to be caring and supportive. So nurture is very powerful and nature is very powerful. They interrelate in very subtle and very beautiful ways.
And given that they both can play an influence on these characters, these qualities of character, that suggests then that, yes, absolutely, I may have a predisposition one way or another around these different characteristics, but that is not etched in stone.
Right.
I can shift it. I can change it.
Right.
If I choose. And that's
if you choose, yes. Choice is probably responsibility and choice. I mentioned the four, when I was first talking, I mentioned the four findings from that research with the people I most admired: levels of consciousness, language and meaning, responsibility and choice, and learning. For living in community, responsibility and choice are probably the most important characteristics that we can muster. And the qualities of character come out of choice, responsibility, of ways we decide to live together. That's where the qualities come from.
I see. And that's why that responsibility and choice piece is so critical.
That's right.
It determines whether I step into or the degree to which I choose to cultivate these qualities or not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit to us about the role that you believe communication plays in sort of reinforcing or nourishing the 5 qualities of character?
Yes, I'd love to do that. The model of communication that is taught in most graduate schools today, and we read in many, many books today, is a sender-receiver model. I send you a message, you receive the message, you make up a new message based on that and send it back to me. Or if you're Stephen Covey, whose work I like, I send you a message, you interpret it first, then you send me a message, I interpret it before I take it in. That model works well in a society in which we think we know the facts of the matter. So I send you a fact, you interpret the fact, and you send me a fact back. And we see it all the time. And we hear this phrase all the time: just turn the news on tonight and you will hear it again. The fact of the matter is, it's especially popular among political people. The fact of the matter is, if we do this, our healthcare system will fail. And the other person says, no, the fact of the matter is, if we don't do this, our healthcare system will fail. This kind of communication does not lead to a nurturing of partnership living, of living community. So I've developed another way of thinking about communication, which I can't really talk about in detail because I find it that I get too philosophical and too abstract, and people don't understand it very well. So I've begun using, well, I did this many, many, many years ago, a metaphor which I call the pebble game. And I think we were going to talk about that later.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
But I was going to say, but let me get into it here. It's not really a game. It is a metaphor. And metaphors, of course, we use when we find something difficult to describe, for example, life. So instead of trying to describe to you what life means to me, I say life is a tree. And so you know that for me, life has roots and it has a trunk, and we crawl up the trunk and we crawl out on the limbs, and one of them breaks off and we climb back up the trunk again. Or if I say life is a journey, then of course life has a road, it comes to a dead end, there are forks, I have to make decisions and so forth. So the pebble game is creative communication, and it proceeds as follows. Players set up a circle, much like a circle you might play marbles in. And they each have a bag of stones, small stones, maybe a ½ an inch or a little more in diameter. I play the game. I bring colored stones, polished stones with me, and we sit around a circle of a white cloth. One of the mothers of one of my participants went out and bought leftover white tablecloths from a hotel and made me a whole bunch of white circles. It's fun to play in white circles because the pebbles contrast so much. But we make a circle around the circle that we have between us, among us, and we each have our stones beside us outside the circle, and we begin the play. One person can place any, we go counterclockwise or clockwise. One person can place any stone he or she wants, anyone, anywhere in the circle. Once it's played, the person cannot touch it again. It cannot be moved by anybody, just like a word. Once you say it, you cannot not have said it. Words are very precious that way. It must be used carefully and intelligently. Players can save their stones up to 5 turns. They can try to place their stones on top of another stone. And the play simply begins and players play. What happens in the game, the implications of the game are clear. First of all, it becomes clear that each player controls what she does or he does with their stone. No player can force another player to do anything with her or his stone. That's personal power. No person can force another person to do anything in this game. The second implication is that every player is equal to every other player. It's built into the game. It's automatic. I played a game one time in Philadelphia, outside of Philadelphia. It was an alternative school, very interesting setup for a workshop. It had board members, administrators, teachers, and senior level students. And we were playing the pebble game. And one of the teachers had brought her 8-year-old daughter because the daycare had fallen through. And her daughter was bored pretty much during the workshop, coloring and doing some reading. But when we started playing the game, she sidled up to her mother and she said, "Mommy, can I play?" And she played. And the PhD and the wealthy board member in the game with her had a tremendous time, and she had a tremendous time. Because in this game, you cannot not be equal. The game is unendingly interesting because you can never predict what will happen next. Players who play for a long time, and I've watched players play for as long as 2 or 3 hours, say that they get more and more excited as they play the game, not because they are making their moves with their own pebbles, but because they can't wait to find out what another person will do with his or her pebble. Talk about genuine interest. The interest is profound. These results of the pebble game don't happen because of some rule that we have to be a certain way with each other. They happen because of the nature of our communication. We communicate in such a way that the qualities of character are expressed automatically. I oftentimes ask players to stand up and go to different games and to sit down at the different games and play. Each time people move, they find it fascinating because the games are all so different, and yet they are all the same. I've taken pictures of many games. They're all beautiful. None of them is ugly. There are a number of things that people do that are kind of cute sometimes in the games. I had an RCMP officer once who said he didn't want to follow the rules. He was going to do what he wanted with his stones. He wasn't going to place them in the circle carefully. So he just dropped them. And of course, every time he dropped them, another player would place their stone in relation to that dropped stone in a very interesting way. After a while, he got the message that random behavior becomes part of beautiful patterns in creative communication. The other time that something interesting happened, again, interestingly enough, an RCMP officer, he was placing all of his stones in a line right in front of him, and across from him was an Aboriginal woman, and on the last play of the game, she took a brownish, rustish stone and placed it across his line of stones right in front of him. And he was upset because he was creating a fort. She was placing the sun on the horizon. Now, when they both understood the other person's meaning, they found it exciting and interesting. So if I am creating a star with my stones, and with those same that same picture, you are creating a flower. We can say, well, we don't understand each other's meanings, so we can't understand each other. Not so. If you show me your star, I can see it. If I show you my flower, you can see it. I call it becoming familiar with each other. So in the work, I tend not to talk so much about understanding. I talk a great deal about being familiar. And I think I'm going over too far now, so we probably need to, to have some time for questions, do we?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Joe. I think what's been so lovely as you describe the Pebble game is I can hear the excitement and the recalling of some very powerful insights that people create from something, from the experience, and it translates such a fundamentally different way of interacting with each other in a way that's also playful and fun. So maybe one day we'll get a chance to play the Pebble game. I would love that.
I'd love to. I love to play it. I play it every workshop.
Well, I would like now to thank you so very much for taking the time to so thoughtfully unpack such rich wisdom and learning that you've distilled into your 5 qualities of character. And I really now would like to engage our listeners in a chance to kind of join today's conversation by sharing either comments or questions that they have. So if you'd like to ask a question or a comment of Joe, if you can type that into your chat box, that would be lovely, so that we can sort of maybe collect some questions and pose them to Joe or share a comment. And if you have just called in, if you press *5 and raise your hand, then we will be able to unmute your line if you're not at a computer to actually type in the question. So Kirsty, can I kind of, can I just open it up and see whether folks are responding to you or giving you some questions?
Yeah, we've got one question, Sylvia.
Beautiful. Do you want to ask it?
Sure. So we're wondering, is there a limit to the number of stones that participants get to use in the Pebble game?
Interesting question. There is no limit. It depends how long you want to play. The longest game I've ever seen was about 2,000 stones were used, and it lasted quite a number of hours. When there's a short game in the workshops, we only have time for 15 or 20 minutes. People, bring some stones, or I give them stones, and whenever they need more, I just give them more. So you can have as many stones as you want. You can explore as many meanings as you want in the Pebble game.
There's another question as well related to the Pebble game, Joe, that's bubbling, which is when you use the Pebble game to support community building and an understanding of communication, do you do it at the front end of the process, or do you bring it in when there's a conflict emerging? How do you introduce it, and how do you use it in the context of building community?
That's a very good question, and it takes me to a part of the workshop that I didn't have time to talk about. That's the time when we deal with difference. When you play the Pebble game, when you use words, and I have a section in the book on using words in the way in which we use pebbles, you make decisions. You have many options for making decisions and for working through conflict. What happens when you use the Pebble game approach to communication, conflict disappears and becomes difference. And difference eventually becomes a foundation for the creation of new meaning. Now, I play the Pebble game right before that section of the workshop, which is the last section of the workshop, because it helps people create the possibility of working through their differences together. That's why I call it conflict transformation rather than conflict management or conflict resolution. Because conflicts, when you use the metaphor of the Pebble game as a foundation for your communication, What you do is you build life experiences. Life experiences become part of what you're doing today at this point, and they make sense of what your ideas are. So if you have certain life experiences related to euthanasia, for example, and I have different life experiences, we will have different meanings for euthanasia. When we explore those life experiences, I call them the I remember whens. When we explore those life experiences together, we don't disagree with each other anymore. Disagreement as a word disappears from the language, which always makes me happy. And it's replaced with, we are different from each other. Now what are we going to do about our differences? What are we going to do together about our differences?
So it shifts the focus, but
it does, yeah.
Gives folks a chance both to sort of explain and express who they are individually.
That's right.
So there's a question that's come from DJ Wells, and he or she is asking that you please repeat the 4 core qualities that came out of your initial research with the folks that you most admired.
Okay, I don't call those qualities, I call those characteristics.
Okay.
As opposed to the qualities. And they are, the first, well, I don't have to look them up, I know. The first one is multiple levels of consciousness. Other animals have multiple levels of consciousness too, but not nearly to the degree of human beings. So with Pavlov's dogs, they can learn to want food, to assume that food is coming, and so they salivate when they hear a bell. They can learn that a bell means food, so they salivate when they hear a bell. Human beings can create experiments to study learning in dogs. No dog can do that. They can do that because they can learn that they can learn that they can learn. Or a great philosopher can think about thinking. So we have multiple levels of consciousness. That's a characteristic which is fundamental in human community. The second is language. The sophistication of language in human animals is phenomenal. And through language we can share meaning. That characteristic is also fundamental in community. The third is, as I think I mentioned, responsibility and choice. When I study responsibility and choice, that's when I come up with the qualities of character, because I have a choice to live with you in a certain way and not another. I don't have to live in a dominator society with you. I can choose to live as a partner with you. So that's responsibility and choice. And the final one of the 4 is openness to learning. Human beings have such large brains, which makes birth so difficult. And with those large brains, they are capable of learning an enormous amount of things. That's the nurture part of human development.
Lovely. And I like how in outlining the 4, you've kind of tied it in kind of visually for me in terms of the 5 qualities of character as well, and how these 2 pieces are related. Just to wrap up this question part of our session today, I did want to end with a comment shared to us from Jackie Specton. She said, after attending the Deepening Community session with Paul Boren the other day, I'm really struck by how these qualities can so powerfully influence how we deepen community. And she thanks you for an absolutely lovely session.
Thank you.
I would like to as well, Joe, add our thanks on behalf of all of us for sharing your insights and perspectives. You really, I think, offered us a way to explore community both within ourselves and others that makes it possible for community to be a living thing no matter where we are. I just want to thank you so much for kind of really enriching how we look at this work that we all care so deeply about. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Let me end with one comment. Well, a series of comments around one thing. What does community mean to me? Why is it so beautiful to me? It's beautiful because I can go through community to get to the world I want to live in. That's that original question.
Oh, lovely.
Right. So I can go from I bet to I wonder, I judge to I learn, I pity to I feel, I want to I need. Can I trust you? Can I trust myself? I know, I mean, I'm lonely, I'm alone with you.
So this is how we will do this. This is how we will get to that place.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you. And let me thank everybody who came today. I hope if you have comments or questions, just email me, and I will do my best to respond to everything that anyone sends me.
Beautiful. So for those of you who have been on the call, over the next few days, we will send you an email that includes a link to the audio portion of today's webinar, as well as some additional resources, including Joe's email, so you can get in touch with him. And he also provided us with a recommended set of readings, which we'll include as well. You can also go online at tamaratcommunity.ca to join and get future notices of upcoming webinars that we will be hosting into the fall. And you'll see that we also there can arrange to have you subscribe to Engage, which is our monthly e-magazine. This is where you'll hear about our face-to-face learning events and our online learning communities that we host, and specifically the communities of practice within each one of those. And we also have we're just finalizing now a fall face-to-face learning schedule. So that is available through the website. So if you want to come and join us and learn face-to-face, we would love to have you. And I wish everyone an absolutely lovely fall afternoon as we get ready for Halloween. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you so much again, Joe.
And thank you.
We look forward to staying in touch.
And thank you.
A lovely afternoon. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks again.
Okay, bye.
Bye.